Hey fifth graders, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at dividing unit fractions by whole numbers. Last week we were taking a look at dividing whole numbers by unit fractions, and we were using models to figure that out. We're going to use models again today to see the relationship when we are dividing unit fractions by whole numbers. So we're going to kind of go old school here, and we're going to remember all the way back to elementary school when we were learning how to divide. And we're going to think about division in terms of splitting up into equal groups, because we're going to be dividing by whole numbers today. So remember that when you're dividing by a whole number, it is the same thing as breaking up the dividends into the number of groups as indicated by the divisor. The amount inside of each of those equal groups ends up being our quotient or our answer. I should also say not just the amount inside of each, but I should say the size of each of those groups ends up being our quotient, our answer. So let's go ahead and make sure we know what all of those mean. So remember, the first number is our dividend. It's what we're dividing up. The next number is the divisor, what we're dividing by. And then our answer is the quotient. Okay. So for this problem, what we are going to think about this time, so last week we thought about division in terms of thinking about how many times 4 goes into 20. Today I want to think about breaking up into 4 equal groups. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up 20 into 4 equal groups. Now as you can see vertically we have 5 equal groups. I don't want to split it up into 5. I want to split it up into 4 equal groups. And I see sideways I have 4 equal rows here. And the size of each one, there's 5 in each, which is why our quotient was 5. Okay, so we're going to use the same train of thought when we're dividing unit fractions by whole numbers. So, when you're dividing a unit fraction by a whole number, you can break up that unit fraction into equal groups as indicated by the whole number divisor. So we're going to take these unit fractions, and just like we did up above here when we're dividing by 4, we're going to split it up into 4 equal groups. We're going to do the same thing with other whole numbers. So your quotient, or your answer, is the size of one of those equal pieces that we are going to form by breaking up unit fractions into equal sized groups. That are formed after you split the fraction into the number of groups as indicated by the whole number divisor. Compare the size of the piece to the whole. So let's do an example together to make some sense out of this. I know that was very wordy. So we're taking 1/2 in this first example, and we are dividing it by 3. So we're going to go ahead and split 1/2 into 3 equal groups. So I'm going to look at 1/2 first. I'm just going to highlight it so that I can really focus on just the 1/2 first. So I have 1/2 a thing. You can think about this as like half a candy bar, half a rectangular cake, whatever you want to think about it as. And we need to split it up into 3 equal groups. And now the question is, what is the size of these equal groups? So what is the size of that? This is actually 1/6, because what we need to do is we need to compare that to the size of the whole. And this is 1 out of 6 equal pieces that would make up this whole thing. So again, so we're talking about the size of each equal group, and these would be 1/6. So when you take half a thing and you split it up into 3 equal pieces, or 3 equal groups, you end up dealing with pieces that are now 1/6 of the whole thing. Let's do another example. So we have a quarter divided by 4. This time we're going to take 1/4 and we're going to split it up into 4 equal groups. So I'm going to go ahead and split it up into quarters this way. Now I want to know, what is the size of one of those pieces? Now it's not just a quarter, because it's actually this tiny piece out of this whole thing. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and cut up the whole thing into these equal sized pieces. And it turns out we now have created 16ths, and each one of these is 1/16. So the size of those equal groups that we just created are 16ths. Let's look at some more examples, and let's look at diagrams that are organized a little bit differently. Let's look at 1/3 divided by 5. got 1/3 up top that I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to split it up into 5 equal groups. So when I take my 1/3 and split it up by 5, I'm going to go ahead and use my finger method. I'm going to kind of create 2 lines to the outside of my finger and then cut those in half. And now we're going to look at the size of each of those pieces that I've now created. So these are really tiny pieces. I'm just kind of circling the size of it. So the way that I figure out how big they are is that I actually need to cut my whole thing up into the same equal sized pieces. And this ends up being 1 out of 15. This is the size of 1/15. Each one of these is 1/15. That is the size of those pieces. So the answer to 1/3 divided by 5 is 1/15. Let's look at 1/5 divided by 3. So I'm taking 1/5 of a thing, which is not a lot, and I'm going to split it up into 3 equal groups. And I want to know, what is the size of those equal groups? Well, if I were to go ahead and cut equal pieces for the whole thing, this is now 1/15 as well, because this is 1 out of 15 total pieces that I've just created. Now, hopefully you're starting to notice a pattern. And hopefully you're noticing that you're multiplying the denominator by the whole number. The numerator remains 1. So that's kind of our shortcut for right now. I'm going to go ahead and continue modeling the next few examples. So I have 1/3 divided by 2. I'm going to start out with 1/3. That's a little sloppy, sorry about that. But I'm going to look at 1/3, and I need to split that up into 2 equal groups. Boom, cut it in half. What is the size of each of those? That is 1/6. And that's 1/6. Your answer is 1/6. I have I have 1/2. I'm going to split that up into 3 equal groups. So here's my 1/2 that I'm focusing on. I'm going to split that into 3 equal groups. This is also 6ths, because if I created entirely equal pieces, 6 of these guys would make up the entire whole. So the size of one of those pieces is 1/6. I have 1/4 divided by 3. This one vertical, so I'm going to look at 1/4. I'm going to split it up into 3 equal groups. And I now have just created, if I cut those all the way across, this is 1/12. Because this is 1 out of 12 equal pieces. That's the size of that piece right there. And lastly, I have 1/5 divided by 2. So I'm going to look at my top 1/5 up here. That's what I'm focusing on. I'm going to cut it into 2 equal pieces. And if I were to do that to all of them, I have just created 10ths. And that is your final answer.